Bill calls me up and he says, Jason, can you do something on thinking about thinking? I said, sure, I'll think about it. And sorry?
Dad joke.
I know, dad joke.
Glass of wine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, it's going to be fantastic. We've got, design thinking and systems thinking and embodied thinking and radiant thinking. Can you do something on corporate thinking? Thanks, Bill. As Bill alluded to, I've been in corporations for most of my adult life. I started managing people when I was 23 years old. And I've learned a lot. I've been in family businesses, so fourth generation family corporation, as well as the big guys, ICI, Orica, as Bill said, Cisco. And I've learned a few things about what stops us in corporations. We have lost that childlike creativity. Sorry, that childlike creativity, and we get institutionalized. So if this thing works. And it was interesting because we didn't rehearse this, but people watch what you say and they look for, does that actually match what you do? Now, answer me this, is that true of corporations? The corporations do what they say. Here's one that was interesting. I saw Mark Ritson speak at Melbourne Business School on Monday, and he used a similar example to this. Corporate social responsibility means operating a business in a manner that meets or exceeds the ethical, legal, commercial, and public expectations that a society has of business. Sounds awesome, doesn't it? And then this happens. Right? So is avoiding the payment of tax congruent with those corporate social responsibilities? Right? And the answer is no. What we end up with is what's called corporate cognitive dissonance, right? Which is where what you say and what you do don't match. Right? So as our little friend here says, it's not denial, it's just very selective about the reality I accept. Now, let's turn that to creativity. We get a paradox when it comes to creativity in corporations, right? Similar to cognitive dissonance. Get back into that cubicle and start thinking outside of the box. How many corporations have you seen that have measures and KPIs on creativity and innovation? Does that make a whole heap of sense? Right? To actually measure people on that level of creativity. Right? Corporate structures, are they designed to enable creativity to occur in our corporations? Right? We get off to a flying start only to come to a grinding halt. What you say and what you do are not congruent. And Rod Serra, you probably saw this some 20 years ago.
I was just going to say, I think I've seen that one.
Yes, you have seen this one before. Jock
McNeish.
that's right, was the cartoonist who drew this, and in fact, you and I were at the same workshop when he drew this. And we were looking for a way of articulating what happens to creativity in organisations. And this spoke into leadership and leadership mindsets in corporations. So you've got a project that's trying to take off. Now you think about a startup, right? We are at government level and at a society level bending over ourselves at the moment to support startups. Yet what happens in corporations, someone tries something, tries to start something, and poor pilot project gets shot down, and the narrative is, I knew it wouldn't work. Doesn't sound like a good story yet, does it? I will get there. There is a positive on the other side of this. Very few companies have built, I don't know if this is a word, but it was at 12 o'clock this afternoon. Navigatable, right? I went to a lunch, it was awesome. Navigatable pathways to reliably grow ideas into sustainable businesses, right? So corporates put all of these circuitous processes in place, right? We've got to go through this hoop and that hoop and this hoop and that hoop just to get an idea off the ground, right? Who's experienced that? Never. Right? Never. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Most of us probably have, right? So where has it got us? right? We roll the dice, right? Because it's not because of the process inside corporations and the way they think about making ideas happen. It's not because of that an idea gets up. It's almost in spite of the process. Okay. This is, I'm showing my age, this is from a fish called Wanda. This is Ken, right? This is what happens to people inside the corporations. People who are paid up, passionate, got a whole bunch of ideas, full of energy to make something happen, and the system beats the right living daylights out of them. Right? So basically they get to the end, but there is an upside for Ken, as you will see at the end of this presentation. All right, so here's the upside. Been exploring recently, in fact since my Cisco days, this intersection between corporates and startups. And traditionally you would have thought, my God, that's going to either kill the startup or it's going to blow the corporate's mind. There is actually a very interesting intersection if you approach the thinking of that intersection in the right way. So vulnerability and discomfort are two of the things that we see at that intersection. This is Rocket Space. Rocket Space are out of San Francisco. They have spawned the likes of Uber, for example, Airbnb. They have some ridiculous amount of market capitalisation in terms of the businesses that they have spawned. It's in the hundreds of billions of dollars. Right? These guys are onto something in terms of how you take an idea to market. These guys have now put a corporate offer together in helping corporations to tap into that startup methodology. Now, this is not about lean startup. This is about changing the way in which corporations think. And you think, my God, why aren't we doing that here? Turns out we are, and I'll tell you about that in a moment. Right? These guys are working with the likes of Lufthansa, for example, businesses you wouldn't naturally think of, right, as being creative or innovative. And they are helping them to be more innovative in the way in which they approach their thinking. You see, the problem is that corporates consider the risk of doing something. You come up with an idea, and we go through all of the risk assessment of, you know, if we do this, what might happen? See, startups don't do that. Startups consider the risk of not doing it, right? Because if they don't do it, they don't eat, right? They go broke, right? And that's not a good thing. So we are slowly changing the conversation here in corporations, getting corporates to think of, you know, Kodak moments, right? What if we don't do this? What could potentially happen? And we've got the landscape littered, right, with corporations who do way too much of this and not enough of that, right? And they have disappeared. Kodak, 130-year-old company, right? And basically took them 4 years to lose something like $1.3 billion in cash that they had in the bank and filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, right? Corporates are busy thinking about ideas. There's all sorts of, you know, idea campaigns and various other things. Startups are busy taking them to market. They get an idea and they say, how do we push this thing out there? And if you look at the likes of Uber, whether you like them or not, doesn't matter. They're changing regulations to make that happen, right? They are changing the rules, right? Because they are focused on taking it to market. Okay, they're fast, they're agile, they're driven, but they lack the scale and distribution power. So you can see here at this intersection, if you can harness the scale and distribution power of a corporate, but with the agility and the drive of a startup, there's something quite special at this interface. Not only that, what I've learned is that you can then affect the thinking inside that corporation. So you help the startup to grow up real quick, but you help the corporation to be more agile as well. So the thinking actually starts to affect each other. It's actually really interesting. So this is not about collaboration, it's called co-creation. This is about, you know, we're not working with a startup or collaborating here, we're getting together to potentially solve a problem. We are co-creating value, and that's the new thing. So with this intersection between corporates and startups is the opportunity to have a very different conversation. I want to just quickly give you a local example, and this is an example literally here in Melbourne. This is a guy called Alvaro Maz. He is the coolest dude I've met in a long time. Mind you, I'm 48, I don't meet many cool people anymore. Apart from you lot.
Present.
Exactly. He runs a business called Code for Australia, and what he does is he works predominantly with government departments. No, sorry, shaking your head. He predominantly works with government departments, right? So I'll give you a very quick for instance. He put some young coders into the Department of Justice. They gave these guys a bunch of data, and the data showed that 58% of court time is taken up with petty matters. Someone didn't pay their parking fine, whoops. Someone didn't pay their speeding fine or whatever, right? And those people go into court and they plead guilty, right? Because, yes, I sped, yes, there's the photo, blah, 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 blah. So 58% of the court's time is taken up with guilty, right, for petty matters. They saw that and thought, well, why can't we just automate this? So they created an app, right, which basically allows you to plead guilty online. Right? Now, it hasn't gone live yet, right, but this is, again, can you imagine that? Changing the thinking inside that department and really challenging the boundaries in which that department thinks. So that's just one small example. Australia Post is another example. They're doing some really interesting work with startups. So it's starting to emerge here in Australia. So go back to Ken. Ken gets his revenge, if you've ever seen A Fish Called Wanda, because he gets stuck in some concrete and ends up flat. Right? So we need to change our traditional models of corporate thinking, and as my learned colleagues are explaining here today, there's lots of different ways of doing that. Thanks for your time.